Hey guys, before we start, a quick shout out to Alpha Dog Nutrition for sponsoring this podcast. Alpha Dog products are now available at dusupply.com, and you can use code ALPHADOG15 at checkout for 15% off and a credit for free shipping to try it yourself. Now let's get you to your podcast.
Where's Fielder? He's gone to the dogs.
Welcome back to the Gone to the Dogs podcast, folks. This is your long-lost co-host, Corey Groover, reporting back at headquarters, and I'm here with my long-lost BFF, Steve Fielder, to bring you the latest in coon dog news and current events. So, Steve, why don't you take it away here? Hi.
Well, nice like the old, hello, good to see you, Corey. Absolutely. We get to see each other on these recordings, which is kind of cool, I think. But now you may not have the same thought. I've been told many times that I have a great face for radio. So, but when you were saying there in your comments, it reminded me of the old Laugh-In show on TV. What's the news across the nation? We have got the information.
All right. That's what I
and
like
we
to
got
hear.
it, man. I mean, we have got information, some of it true, some of it nearly true, some of it we wish were true, some of it better not be true. There's all kinds of information we have out here. But hopefully we're going to share it in this next hour or so. And I want to definitely say welcome back, man. We missed you. Missed you big time.
I'm glad to be back. I haven't had anybody to talk to in 2 weeks besides my wife and kids. So, I'm glad to be here for sure.
Well, it's kind of funny. My buddies, that I speak to on a regular basis, guys like Randy and guys like Nubbin Moore and Mark Miller and all these guys. And the conversations lately have kind of always gone, well, I don't have anything to report, but I just thought I'd check in. We're in this, I don't know if we're in dog days yet or not, but sure feels
close.
like it down here in Florida, that's for sure.
I can't walk outside without sweating right now, but I think that has more to do with my weight than anything. So,
oh boy. Well, we'll put in a little shameless plug for Mark and Fever. He came up to the Virginia State Field Trial Championship this last weekend, which we're recording this on the 24th of June, and it will air, about the first, sometime in July, anyway. But, he, I said, how'd you do in the water race, Mark? He said, nah, we got beat bad. And he said, he's not in shape. And I said, well, whose fault is that? You're down there playing on a cruise boat in Aruba and Curacao and Coco Key and all this stuff. I said, that dog's not going to get out of that kennel and take himself down to the swim pond.
Should have tied him up behind the boat and made him swim the whole way.
That's right. Well, I can't diss my buddy because he drove the 3.5 hours from Taylorsville, North Carolina, up to Clifton Forge, Virginia. And the thermometer in the truck, now I don't know if that would pass muster with the weather department or whatever, but it was 100 degrees in that new Chevrolet big red truck that he's got. So I'd say it's pretty close to that.
Oh, you finally bought him a new truck?
You're right.
Oh,
right.
Man.
Right. That's what Trey Perrin down in Alabama is saying. I should give him a raise. I said, what do you mean a raise? I mean, that's our deal is 50-50. He's, and it's really not fair to Mark because he's doing all the work.
Well, I mean, if the
But
dog's 50-50, then I'd say the truck's 50-50 too, right? I guess you got to
no,
draw the line somewhere because that wouldn't work for your wife or anything else. So,
no, I'm afraid not. But yeah, Mark, he's one of these guys. If you don't go first class, just stay home. Stay on the
oh
porch.
no.
But anyway, yeah, he drove up there, and it was hot, plenty hot, and Fever. There was a video, and Fever just blistered the pack in the grand final on the field trial. But when he got to the tree, he didn't bark. He found
Oh
that
man.
tree instantly, man, and he's up on that tree, and I think, yeah, he's got it. And he said, "Well, I got the line in the grand final." I said, "What do you mean the line? You didn't get the tree too?" And he said, "Nope, didn't bark." And then he confesses to me, "Well, I put him in the treeing contest, and he won that." I said, "Well, he was probably barked out by then." So anyway, we have a lot of fun with that dog, and he needs a couple of more wins now to be a grand field, and we'll probably be done with that stuff. But it's been a fun ride, really has.
Good
Well,
deal.
listen, sounds like you got some Plott news you were kind of telling me about there about that Goldie female you got.
Oh yeah.
What's been going on with Goldie?
Well, Goldie finally decided to come into heat, and this is the first heat cycle that I've seen her have. We had some. I got her when she was about a year old, and I'd never seen her have a heat cycle up until now. So I was getting a little concerned about that. I know some females can go up until they're just over 2 before they have a heat cycle, but her sisters had cycled and everything. So I was like, doggone it, we need to get this female to cycle. And that could probably be a whole nother podcast. But, I've had really good luck. For me, when a female is not cycling correctly or not cycling at all, 9 times out of 10, it's all nutrition based. And that's what I've found over the years, especially with females that I've bought from people specifically because they wouldn't come in heat. I've been able to turn them around and get them to cycle just by changing their food or supplementing a little bit. So we're not advertising this product at all, but whenever I have that problem, I go to a supplement called Breed Heat, and I can't remember the company that manufactures it. They kind of just changed hands here not too long ago. But if you Google Breed Heat, you'll find the supplement. And man, she didn't get halfway through that jar, and she's already bleeding and swallowed up and everything like that. So I say all that to say that we're going to give her a little break during this summer heat we got going on, and we're going to take her over and we're going to get her bred and raise litter puppies out of her. So,
well, I've got some questions for you.
I knew you would.
Yeah. Well, okay, I know we haven't had any conversation, so I know she's not going to North Carolina. I know, and that's fine. I mean, no pressure.
Okay, all right.
No. That's one thing about breeding dogs. I'll digress here a little bit and take a little rabbit path. We all have our ideas, and we all look at these dogs and we make our decisions, hopefully educated decisions, based on all kinds of different criteria. But when somebody picks a stud for their female, I know I don't question that because I believe that anybody that has a nice female wants to take it to the dog that they believe will do the best, produce the best result. Now, so I asked questions about several of the popular Plott studs that are out there, and you gave me no on each one of them that I suggested, but you picked one that's close. So tell us who you're going to breed her to.
Yeah, so right now we've got plans to get her over to Northwest Ohio, just on the other side of Toledo, if that gives you any hints. She's going to be going over to Bill Scheninger, and she's going to get bred to Saddle Up Joe.
Saddle Up Joe, not Set 'em Up Joe and play. What is it? Settle Up. No, what was that song Vern Gosdin had and play B-24? Set 'em Up Joe. Set 'em Up Joe and play D-24 or B-24. I don't remember. Old country song. Okay, Joe is the litter mate brother to Saddle Up Lazarus, correct?
Yep, that's correct.
And I believe there were 3 males in that litter.
Yeah, was
Chris Matney has the other one named Hawk, I believe.
Yeah, you're right about that.
Isn't that right?
Yes, you are.
You can't beat the old man on this Plott trivia.
Attaboy. Yeah, so it's always tough being the owner of the female in this equation because, ideally we want to make educated decisions when we breed our females, and we want to, obviously, every cross that we make, we want it to be successful. And I think that there's always more than one way to skin that cat. And, anybody that's had a female in this particular situation and is working on picking a stud dog, you may talk to 4 or 5 different guys with different dogs to try to get an idea of what you finally want to decide on. And that's always the awkward part for me, being that I'm a female guy and I like having females for, the purpose of raising pups and stuff like that. You never want to hurt anybody's feelings just by picking a certain dog over another. But, at the end of the day, you have to pick what makes the most logistical sense. You have to pick what you think is going to benefit you the most in the long run. And Joe was a really easy decision for me. Number one, because Bill is a first-class guy. That's huge. That's a huge aspect in the stud dog game, all dogs aside. You got to have a professional guy campaigning these stud dogs, otherwise nothing's going to happen. And Bill, he's a first-class guy. Joe, he's obviously done his share of winning, and I like everything that I've seen about him. And strategically, I think it makes a lot of sense to breed to Joe because of Lazarus's popularity and the amount of pups that he's putting on the ground. I think that, from a strategic point of view, that I'm going to have a lot of options of different things to breed to in the future should I, decide to pursue that bloodline or make some crosses here and there. I don't know. This is my first time breeding Plott, so this may be a one and done scenario. But
well, there's no magic crosses. There's no, proven crosses. People say this is a proven cross. Well, I've seen many, many times subsequent litters out of the same cross be nothing at all like the first cross. So I'm not a big proponent of the putting my faith in proven crosses. I like to breed within a family of dogs. I do like that. And of course, I like the idea that you're breeding her to a saddle-up bred dog because that kind of keeps it in the family for Mark and me down the road should we decide we just can't do without one of those Goldie Joe pups or whatever the case may be, But that's great. That's great news. So you're going to get that done here pretty soon then. I guess.
Yeah. She is heading out there as we speak, and hopefully we're going to get something done. And, I think that I think that when you breed a female that young, it tends to throw guys a little bit. I don't know so much about the Plott breed, but with other breeds, I know that, a lot of guys, they sit on their females a little bit too long, in my opinion. And what happens is we get consumed with finishing this dog to night champion or getting its money won, getting it on the big stages of these major events. And all we do is it's a ticking time bomb. These females, their fertility never gets any better than when they are, at 2 years old. And Goldie's right at that window. Goldie has proven to me that she is a nice coon dog, and she's from a family of coon dogs, and that's all the more I need to get some cheap insurance on her with a litter of pups. So that's kind of the idea here. Is Joe's going to facilitate as the insurance for me, and he's going to hopefully get me a nice litter of pups, so that way, God forbid anything happened to her while we're campaigning her. We got Plan B in the background. So,
well, great news. It's great news, and we're always hopeful, and that's really all we can do. We can do our homework, and and then we can hope that it all the, as they say, the stars line up.
yeah.
And everything works out just great. And I'm very hopeful that it will, Corey.
Well, I appreciate.
Can't wait to see that bunch of brindle little buddies.
Oh,
my dad used to say first time he went over to Isaiah Kids and looked in the whelping box there in the outbuilding there beside the house, and he said it looked like a nest full of chipmunks in there, all those little little striped Plott puppies.
Oh man, I hope I can handle a whole litter of Plott puppies. I don't know.
Well, it takes a special guy to be a Plott man.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, I can see what it's done to your hairline, Steve. So.
That's right. That's right.
Oh.
Well, yeah, there's that side of it too. Hey, we're getting up here. I just realized the other day, I was kind of looking at the calendar here, and we're bumping right up. By the time this thing comes out, we'll be in July already, and man, that only means really less than 2 months to Autumn Oaks.
Oh my goodness.
Autumn Oaks. Can you imagine? And that's always kind of ushers in the fall for me in my mindset. When Autumn Oaks rolls around, then hey, we're getting close to fall.
Yeah.
So
that's happening again this year, huh? Man, it really.
They're going to do it again. Can you believe that? Well, now I'm going to ask you a little bit. Now, of course, when you were with UKC and you were with them, part of your duties, I assume, was to attend Autumn Oaks, right?
Oh yeah. Well, we spend a whole week in Richmond, Indiana, man. That was always
the old
something.
saying is you spent a week in Richmond, Indiana one day, right?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate, I'd say. Well, you did the same thing.
Oh yeah, and it was fun. I got to bounce around a couple different venues, 3 or 4 actually. We had Autumn Oaks at Oak Harbor, Ohio, the first year I worked for UKC up by Port Clinton, up there on Lake Erie, and beautiful spot and all. But the entries were waning, and so then we did the homecoming to Indiana and went to Jasper. And from Jasper, we went to Logansport, Indiana.
Oh, wow.
And then from Logansport, we went to Richmond, and there she stays to today. So got to bounce around a little bit. But Autumn Oaks is a fun event. My problem, Corey, is there's no cure for it. The guys in my age group are dropping like flies. Let's just face it. I got the hard news today that a former pastor of mine that was from out around, I think originally was from North Carolina, and his wife was from Louisiana, and they came and pastored the church that I attended in West Virginia after having a very successful church in Joplin, Missouri. And then they eventually went back there and I think their latest pastorate has been in Neosho, Missouri. Dr. Mac Evans. Not going to get off on, we're not going to hold church today, and I'm not going to say a whole lot about it. But I've never sat down in a pew, with the exception of my lifelong pastor, Tom Waldron in West Virginia, and my current pastor, Mark Quattrochi, here in Trinity, Florida. But Dr. Mac Evans was probably the best preacher that I ever heard preach a sermon. And he was so interesting and so informed and so funny. I'll never forget, he'd say, "You got trouble in your marriage. What you need to do, now listen to me, you book a trip and you pack your toothbrush. That's it. And you'll work out those marital problems."
Oh, my gosh.
He was a funny guy, and a great theologian.
Yeah.
And he was. Well, church has always been a very, very important part of my life. I know it's not for all the listeners out there. I think it's important, and I wish it were. But at any rate, I was saddened by that news. But to get back to what I was saying, is a lot of my contemporaries are passing away. And the guys that I always saw at Autumn Oaks, the guys I really enjoyed seeing and talking to, guys like Dwayne Clark, Spring Creek Rock fame, and Mike Boone, his handler, those guys I always gravitated into around the Walker tables to talk to those guys, and on the list goes. We see it on Facebook has brought a lot more news into our lives than ever before. But anyway, so from that aspect, not seeing a lot of my old buddies, the guys that I saw for so many years, Sheldon Swinson, who operated the golf cart vendor there. Excuse me. Well, I still have that tick in my throat, guys, and I can't help it, but I need to back off a little bit. But Autumn Oaks for me will always be, as long as I go, and I do plan to go this year, will be about the people that are there, the fun times. Do you have any good memories about Autumn Oaks, or things that you enjoyed about it, or was it just, I know, a lot of work if you're on staff at UKC, a lot of work?
I can say, I think the first Autumn Oaks that I ever went to, aside from working for UKC, I think it was in 2010, which, if I'm not mistaken, that was the 50th anniversary Autumn Oaks. I think it was.
It may have been. The first year was 1960, so that sounds reasonable.
Right. Yeah. So that was kind of the first year I went, and obviously that was a grand spectacle in a good way. My favorite memories came from just camping. Honestly, I've only ever hunted at Autumn Oaks once in my life, and I treed a possum in the first 5 minutes of that cast and was done. hunting the night champion dog, and haven't hunted there since. But man, I've got so many good memories from working there and working with the event and all the field reps and stuff like that, and it's just fantastic. But I actually have a funny story that comes from the first Autumn Oaks that I was ever at working for UKC. If we got the time, I can tell it.
We always have time for your stories, Corey.
Okay, so obviously a lot of us are well experienced with the draw out at Autumn Oaks and how it works. So the casts are drawn well into the afternoon at Autumn Oaks, and the scorecards are divvied up to the field reps who are going to go to these respective satellite clubs. and the scorecards are given to the field reps. The field reps leave for the satellite clubs, and then the owners of the dogs on those casts have to report to their satellite club, and then hypothetically speaking, the dogs are drawn out there. The cards are divvied out to the hunters, and everybody goes hunting from there. Well, we had a field rep at the time from Kentucky, Mr. L.B. Neat. You remember L.B.?
L.B.
So Alan had divvied out all the scorecards for the night, and I can't remember if it was Friday or Saturday night. It was one of the two. But, he divvied out the cards and put them in envelopes and handed them to the field reps, and off the field reps went to these satellite clubs. And for those of you who haven't had the opportunity to hunt an autumn oak, sometimes the drive between a satellite club and the fairgrounds can be a considerable distance. You could be looking at an hour drive to a satellite club in order to
or
hunt.
more
Or
in
more.
extreme cases.
Yeah. And so we had gotten through for the afternoon, and we were standing around planning on where we were going to go eat that night. And we get a phone call from Elby. And Elby's like, I left my envelope of scorecards there at the fairgrounds, and I'm already in Bryant, Indiana.
Oh, no.
So, obviously, Alan being the type A person that he is, he's like, oh my gosh, and that was kind of my moment. That was my moment. I was going to really prove myself to everybody. And I was like, hey, I was like, throw me the ball, coach. Give me the scorecards. I'll hop in the truck. I'll run them up there as fast as I can. I'll get a speeding ticket if I have to. I'll help LB get those guys to the woods. So, Alan was like, well, if you're sure you can get them there in time, blah, 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 blah. So
what were you going to do otherwise, right?
Yeah, exactly. So anybody that's been out in front of the Tom Raper Center there's a lamp post that sits right in between there and the next building over where they have the cafeteria. And we had parked I can't remember what year it was, but it was a GMC 1500 pickup that we had at the time that UKC had that we had driven down there. It was sitting right next to that lamppost, and that lamppost had a big old concrete collar to it that came up from the asphalt, a good ways up. And I was getting all my stuff together to go run these cards to LB, and I came busting out that door, and Wayne Cavanaugh and Alan were standing out front while Alan was smoking a cigarette. And I ran past them. I jumped in that truck. I turned it on, and I cut that wheel as sharp as I could to back her up and get going. And I smashed into that lamppost. I mean, just took out the whole front bumper of that truck. And, there wasn't any hiding it. There wasn't any wondering what was that. I knew exactly what I had done. And Alan and Wayne were just kind of standing there, and I backed up real slow to them, and I looked at Alan, and I was like, Alan, am I fired? And he said, not if you leave right now. So I drove that truck all the way to Bryant to get LB his scorecards, and we got there with plenty of time to get the guys their cards and get the cash drawn out. But I definitely was on a watch list at UKC as far as the insurance policy was concerned.
I wonder what happened to you.
I'm telling you. And the reason that story is so funny to me was because that was the first of like 3 incidences I had with vehicles up there. And I'm normally not that bad with vehicles, but for some reason I was on a little bit of a roll there. And
I got you.
That was
I don't think I ever wrecked anything. I used to drive those motorhomes. We had 3 different ones in the tenure that I spent there. Of course, I was there, I think, about 16 years or so. But no, we didn't have any accidents like that. I know one time we were heading out on I-94 there, heading toward Battle Creek, and with the big Winnebago, and the bounce in the seams in the highway, and the entire plumbing apparatus of that thing fell out on the interstate, and I had to pull over and go back and collect a bunch of PVC pipe.
Oh my
off
gosh!
the highway.
Well, the only other one I can remember was UKC had purchased themselves a minivan shortly after that. You know, it was a brand new minivan. And for some reason, we had a field rep. I want to say it was Wendell Bond. Wendell Bond's out of Virginia. And Wendell was in charge of the zone semifinals that year in Meadville, Pennsylvania, which is in my backyard. And Wendell couldn't make it there by the deadline for that event. So Alan had me load up, and I drove out there to cover the zones for that one night until Wendell could get there. So I was basically in charge of drawing all the dogs out. So I took the brand new minivan out there, and I had enlisted a bunch of help from local people that I knew to help me with the scorecards and everything like that, and getting cast to the woods and everything. And everything went swimmingly. And that night, me and my buddy Todd Turner I was driving him back to his place, and I smoked a deer in that brand new van. I smoked it. There wasn't nothing left of it. So, I had quite the reputation with vehicles up there.
Well, this is all good information for me to file in case you ever ask to borrow my truck.
Yeah. You're not kidding about that. My wife even looks at me sideways still to this day.
Yeah, I know Chris Powell. Everybody knows Chris. We were coming back from Plott days back to he was dropping me back at the Cincinnati airport. We'd been to Tell City, Indiana, and he had a new Chevy pickup, nice new truck, all bright and shiny. And we were coming back, and this deer with the death wish, man. We're booking down about 70 miles an hour. Pow.
Oh, man.
I think Chris told me it was only $7,000 is what that,
only. Okay.
That deer cost. Yeah.
So, vehicle collisions aside, what about you? Do you got a favorite memory from Autumn Oaks or story?
Oh, I've got several. I really do.
Let's narrow it down to like one or two for sake.
I think one I've had the most laughs out of, and I wish I had Lee Kearns and Johnny Brinkley on here, and we could really hoot it up on this one. It was probably Thursday night at Autumn Oaks before the shows and all that stuff got started. And we decided to go coon hunting. And I believe we had Reagan Lanter. You know Reagan there at the Wayne County Coon Hunters?
Oh, yeah. Who doesn't know Reagan?
Yeah. Well, I think Reagan was our guide. And we went out there coon hunting. And Lee had a couple of dogs. He had the Boomer dog and the Rowdy dog. Johnny had a dog. Oh, he's going to hate me if oh no, Johnny don't listen to podcasts. But anyway, he had a nice dog. It wasn't Capital City Sam. It was the one he had after that he showed quite a bit, a Plott dog. I had a little Plott dog I called Roper, and we went hunting. And we went outside of Richmond there somewhere, not very far. And the dogs treat a coon. Now, here we are. Now, this true confession's good for the soul, they say. And I think the statute of limitations is out on something like this. I hope so, anyway. But we treat a coon, and it was, I believe, in a wild cherry tree, in a fence row. And somebody got the bright idea that we ought to just jump that coon out and have another race out of it. Okay, so I think 2 or 3 of us tried to climb up that tree and shake that coon out. And I don't remember which one actually succeeded. As I look back, I don't think any of us actually succeeded in getting that coon to jump out of that tree, which was, not kosher. But it was typical coon hunter stuff, And here's 3 guys. Of course, we weren't quite as old then. That's been at least 20 years ago, maybe 30. I don't know. But anyway, we laughed and laughed about it. I said, what if one of us fell out of that tree? and we got to tell the story, you know. But that's one of my favorite memories.
Have you ever had any luck climbing a tree to shake a coon out? Because I know from other people's experiences that used to be a very common practice back in the day. But I have never had any luck climbing a tree and trying to shake a coon out. I could tell you 100 stories about how it all went wrong. But
are you saying you just couldn't get the coon to jump out? Or are you saying that
I don't
dogs
know.
couldn't run the coon or what?
Well, no, getting it out of the tree. Because, like, I know the reason my dad is not a coon hunter today was because my grandpa made him climb every single tree and shake every single coon out that they ever treed. And, obviously that's a tedious task, but man, I must have ran into every coon that I ever tried to do it with was like Iron Man. They'd hang on for dear life. They'd jump trees. They would do anything they could, but fall straight out of that tree.
Well, first of all, before we get into this to discuss, and I do have some thoughts, do not climb trees.
Yes.
If you're under the sound of my voice right now, out there across the wide podcasting sphere, do not climb trees.
Yep.
The record will show that there are deceased coon hunters, there are paraplegic coon hunters, there are quadriplegic coon hunters that fell out of a tree attempting to shake a coon out of the tree to the dogs.
Yep.
So, number one, do not do it. Now, I have done that many times. When I was younger, I could never climb the way my father could climb. My dad could climb an oak tree that was 15 feet to the first limb like a squirrel. And he didn't take his take his shoes off. I've heard guys say they did it barefoot and all this.
Jesus.
I'm talking an oak tree that, was 18, 20, 24 inches through the butt, and just with his hands in the bark and his knees holding himself and shinnying up the tree. And there were a lot of guys. Of course, he was a farm boy from Tennessee. I'm sure he learned that as a kid, shaking possums out of trees to those cur dogs. But Kentucky was a state that had a shakeout season. Their season came in late summer, I think, and you could tree a coon and climb the tree and shake it out.
No kidding.
Yeah. It was called shakeout season. It came in before the regular kill season. And maybe we'll ask for some stories to appear on Coon Hunting Conversations on Facebook of some of the guys that are listening to this that have some stories to share. I hesitate to share these stories because, from what I said at the beginning of this thing, do not climb trees. It's not worth it, guys. It is not worth one slip and putting yourself in a wheelchair for life, or worse. Yes. I can't overemphasize that. But I can remember one of the earliest experiences hunting with the great old Plott breeder Isaiah Kidd, Sinks Grove, West Virginia, the guy for which they named the 3-night high-scoring dog award at Plott Days, which was just won by our friend Jacob Coons here just 3 weeks ago or so, which was also won by Bill Schenniger's Lazarus dog. And down the list, the closest we ever got, my dad and I, we won the opposite sex one year. But anyway, where did I go? How did I get off on that?
Climbing trees.
Yeah, with Isaiah Kidd. Thank you.
Yes. Yep.
we treed a coon in an apple tree, and I was just a kid, a very young kid. My dad was hunting a female named June, and I posted a picture of old June and her pedigree, and all was in a recent article in Full Cry magazine. Isaiah Kidd was hunting his current stud dog at that time, a dog called Kidd's Rock. He, by the way, produced a female named Kidd's Goldie.
Ah.
And Goldie was bred back to Rock, her dad,
Ooh.
and produced a female they called Jeep.
Jeep.
And Jeep was the mother of our Sam, who was the foundation sire of our line of dogs.
Okay.
Anyway, I'll get to the story. They sent me up that apple tree to shake that coon out. Well, I could climb the apple tree okay. That was no problem. Because the limbs were low, excuse me while I cough. The limbs were low enough that I could get a hold of them. And, an apple tree, hey, that's not any big deal. But that coon was up there, and he was big, and he was angry. He did not want to go down to meet those dogs. And so I was given the task of shaking him out. And one of the ways that I learned, you mentioned earlier that you had difficulty getting them out of the tree, is you stand on the limb that the coon is on, and you hold on to the base of the tree, and you bounce up and down on that limb. And it gets him going so like a trampoline, and he'll turn loose. Friends, please don't try this.
No.
I could tell you that I can do a full gainer off the New River Gorge Bridge in West Virginia, but I'm not going to do it.
Well,
I'm not going to try to shake out any coons out of trees anymore. That used to be common.
Yeah, I'll say this much. I think that the art of climbing trees is something that's being lost to time.
Good.
And the only reason I say that is because how many kids have you seen lately hanging out in a oak tree out front? It's not something that you see very often, but yeah, back in the day, that was a very common occurrence, especially when you get way back there and you talk to hunters that couldn't afford rifles and couldn't afford ammunition on top of that.
Well, Nubbin will tell you about carrying tree climbers to the woods, sets, and they sold them in the coon hunting magazines. They strapped onto your legs, and they had the spikes on the inside of your foot, that you could dig that spike into that blade into the tree and go right up the tree. And the wise hunters they'd put a dog lead or something around the tree and around their body to act as a safety. And then they also would move it up and use that chain to pull themselves up that was a different era. There's no reason to do that. And go ahead. I have another thought about that.
Well, I was just going to say it's coming back. It's coming back around now, though, because if you look at a lot of the major deer hunting programs out there, a lot of guys are hunting out of tree saddles now, and that's exactly what they're using to get into trees. Is they're using almost like a lineman's I don't know what you call it, but lineman spikes where they climb the telephone poles and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, we commonly call them just tree climbers, and we jokingly said, back in West Virginia, going coon hunting, you go, who's got the climbers, who's got the dynamite, who's got the axe. It was a different era back then. I went hunting one night with a couple guys, and we must have chopped a dozen trees down. I'm not kidding. I'm just a kid. My dad's away working as a pipe fitter. I would go coon hunting with anybody that would take me. Anybody. The town drunk, no problem, And we went to this one place and we treed a coon, and it was up about I don't know, 8 inches through the butt, something like that. Out came the axe, chop that baby down, hold the dog up toward the top of the tree, and when the tree hit the ground, the coon would be right at the top, and he'd take off, and you'd give him a little head start, and then cut the dogs. My dad was livid. He said, "You're making my dogs meal and leave the tree. They won't stay treed. Don't be doing that. The end of the race is supposed to be at the tree. Don't do that stuff." But we chopped down a bunch of them. But I got afraid one time. I went with a couple of fellas coon hunting, and I was the climber. And it was mainly just to get up there to see if we could find the coon, because it was a tall tree, and some of those trees in the mountains are very, very tall, some of those oaks. And I climbed way up there in that tree, and I found the coon. But I looked down, and those guys' lights down on the ground looked like specks of light to me. And that treetop was waving back and forth, with under my weight. And I said, "This is crazy. If I fell, I'd be falling yet. I'd still be falling." And Nubbin told a story about that the other day too, about how he was afraid, got afraid that he'd fall out and nobody would know where he was hunting, because we didn't have GPSs or anything like that.
Yeah.
So
my favorite tree climbing story that I had, I was always a big kid, so I very seldom climbed trees, just because I know how gravity works, and like you said, it's not very smart to climb trees in the first place. But I had a Grand Night female that I was hunting that we called Pebble, and I had a pup out of Pebble that was doing a really good job. She was running and treeing on her own, and she was only about 7 months old at the time. Well, this was one of the rare occasions that I actually took my wife, who was at that time my girlfriend, coon hunting with me. And old Pebble and Frizzin was the pup's name, Frizzin. Pebble and Frizzin rolled in there, and they treed on the edge of an old apple orchard. Well, the coon was sitting right there.
Let me interrupt that. With the name Frizzin, was that in relation to like a muzzle-loading rifle?
Yes, sir. Yeah, because Pebble's registered name was Locked and Loaded Pebble, and I was going along with the Locked and Loaded theme, so I had Locked and Loaded Frizzin. That was her name. So
all right,
we just called her Frizz for short. But
gotcha. But go ahead. I'm sorry, I interrupted again.
No, you're all right. So we had Pebble and Frizz, and they rolled in there and treed together on the edge of this apple orchard, and I get in there, and the coon's sitting right there, plain as day. I told the wife, I said, "Here, I'm going to give you these two females. Hold them back. I want to roll this guy out, and we'll turn Frizzin loose again and let her run it and tree it on her own." So I go to climbing this apple tree, and, it's not a very high apple tree. I felt pretty confident about it, I get up there, and I start shaking. I'm taking this thing back and forth. Those dogs are frothing at the mouth. They're dragging my wife all over the place. Well, that coon was up in the tippy top, and I watched him, and he never moved. He just reached his hand out like that, and he grabbed the limb of the next apple tree over, and he pulled himself over into the next tree. So we did that for about four trees in a row down this apple orchard. And finally, he got to the other side of it from me, and I'm dog tired at that point. My wife, she's
over it.
She's over it. The dogs are even getting over it. And I get to that last tree, and I'm like, you got nowhere to go now. And I start shaking. And that coon, that's the most intelligent thing I've ever seen a raccoon do. He used the momentum from me shaking to launch himself over into a cherry tree that was just on the outside of this apple orchard. And then he scooted his way up to the top, and I never saw him again.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of reminiscent of hunting in the orange groves here in Florida, where they'll cross out. The orange trees grow together. They're bushy. That, of course, they trim them and so forth, but they grow out. So the limbs of one tree touch the other tree. You
Yeah,
know?
right.
And yeah, that's that's pretty funny.
Now, do the raccoons in Florida, do they hammer the oranges pretty good?
Oh yeah,
I would
yeah. In
imagine.
the winter time, that's when the oranges get ripe. You know, and after the
Oh,
weather gets colder, the juice gets sweeter. And oh yeah, they love oranges.
oh my
And
gosh.
yeah, we hunted. My buddy Matt Britt and I hunted with a fella down here for a while that had access to a 30,000 acre orange grove.
Oh my
One
gosh.
orange grove, 30,000 acres. Roads all through it. You just kind of drive down the road looking down the rows. You know, you could get a vehicle most of the time down between each row. And
Sure.
that's, you know, that's where they go and pick up the oranges as the pickers. They use, you know, migrant labor. And at dark, when we'd be going in coon hunting, the laborers' buses would be rolling out of the grove, loaded with pickers, you know, going home for the day.
Wow.
And they still do that sort of thing. But that was all of Central Florida when I was here in college in the 60s. But diseases and frost, the freezes started coming farther down, you know, and there's a disease, and I don't know what it's called, that gets into the root system of the orange trees and kills them out.
Oh
And
man.
so it's kind of devastated the citrus industry in a lot of Florida. It's not nearly what it used to be down here.
Sure.
But yeah, coons love those oranges. I do too, if they're
Yeah, I can
ripe.
imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, but you can hear some good races. I've got some good tapes of some races that I taped, you know, and you can hear the dogs pretty well.
Hmm.
And the nice thing about it is you can just drive around those blocks or those squares, you know, and get closer to the dogs. But they invariably will get into one of those heads where, you know, the ground is swampy and the ground is uneven and some sinkholes and things where they couldn't plant orange trees. Well, then naturally those areas just grow up with everything, all kinds of underbrush and all that. Anyway, yeah, don't climb trees, guys. But you know that many years ago, people used those shakeout races, they called them, to start young dogs because you got a hot track right there. You know, when that tree hits the ground, that coon's going to take off,
Oh yeah.
and most of the time run pretty good. You know, so that was a good way to get your dog on a hot track. I was going to tell one other little story about that. My dad was a pipe fitter, and he walked that high steel with a block and tackle on his shoulder. You know, as I'd say, Dad, you're playing without a net. You know,
Hmm.
so he was fearless when it came to climbing trees, and I've seen him out on a limb trying to get a coon to turn loose at the top of what we call a high wall in West Virginia, where they strip mine coal and left a sheer cliff around. And if he would have fallen off that limb, he'd probably still be falling, you know, and scare me to death, and didn't bother him at all, didn't faze him. So I won't say my dad was a daredevil. He really wasn't. He wasn't that kind of guy. He
Yeah.
wasn't a thrill seeker or anything, but
My
dogs
dad
were treated, you know.
My dad wasn't either. I think it was just his thin physique that
Yeah.
made him the tree climber in the bunch, you know. So
Well, I got a pleasant surprise this week, and has nothing to do with what we're going to talk about. But someone sent me a picture, and it was the son of. This picture had gotten into circulation through the son of one of the guys I used to bear hunt with years ago, back in the 70s in West Virginia, and it was a picture. We had killed this bear, and everybody in the hunting group got in that picture, in that group picture.
Oh, nice.
And man, that was a trip to go back and look. Now they had somebody who had identified had a couple mistakes in the identity of the people that were there, but a lot of those guys are no longer with us, you know. And the fellow that sent me the picture said, you know, I was told that this was really a hardcore bunch of bear hunters back in the day. I said they were. They really were. They were good hunters though. They knew. They thought like a bear. You know,
Oh,
and they
yeah.
had good dogs and all. But that was a trip for me back. That would have been in like the mid '70s. So that's 50 years ago. You know.
Oh, wow.
So yeah,
That long.
I'm old. I'm older than dirt. All right. Last week, oh, you said you went to a youth hunt last. Now this week, as we're recording this, the podcast is playing with a young hunter in Georgia named Caden Riley, and Caden's an amazing young man, and he's promoting a series of hunts that will culminate in a championship in October. They're PKC hunts for youth. And he has a younger, I guess they divide the youth in two different age groups. And so I had him on, we talked all about this stuff, and it was pretty amazing to hear his accounts of the demeanor and the sportsmanship and the knowledge and ability and all that of these young handlers today. And you had a recent experience you were telling me about, Corey. Share that.
Yeah,
Corey.
I just happened to, it was 2 weeks ago. I was a master of hounds at a tree and walker sectional that my own club was holding. And we were really fortunate. We held it as a double header event, and we had 18 dogs in the first round, and we had 15 dogs in the second round. So we had quite a few people there. And one of the hardest parts of being a master of hounds at an event is selecting your judges and guides. I would say selecting your guides is probably the most difficult, and then selecting good quality judges goes right along with that. And I was so impressed at that event. That's the first UKC hunt kind of the year for my club. And we had a ton of young participation this year as far as young guys. And when I say young, I'm talking 30 and under. And in both rounds, I had every single judge and guide I had for the most part was under the age of 30. And I was just amazed by that, and 30 is kind of the high end of my range that I'm talking about here. But most of the guys that I had guiding and judging were, 20 years old or, in their very late teens or something like that. As an example, Troy Smith was one of my judges, in that particular hunt. And, I had another young guy named Julian Lawrence who was just at his first hunt. That was his first hunt with his dog that he's been hunting, and he was guiding and helping me and stuff like that. And I was just really encouraged to see that. And I don't know if we've got some sort of young resurgence coming up through the sport here, but man, that was great to see. And I take my hat off to all those young guys that helped me. That was just fantastic. Did my heart some good.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that goes right in line with what Caden Riley is doing there in Georgia, and he's a young guy. He's 19 years old. And he contacts PKC and contacts Chris Freiberger there, the National Youth Director. I think I pronounced your name right, Chris. I hope so. And says, I need a model. I need something here to go with. I want to give these kids some recognition and promote coon hunting among the young guys. And Caden himself had just graduated out last year from the PKC youth program. And that is so gratifying to me. Now, it brings to mind something to me. that for those of you who are like me, a little old, hopefully you're not as old as I am, but, mentors, these young hunters are interested in our sport. They need you guys at the club to help steer them the right way. And when you see them going in a direction that you know that won't work, you've been there before and you know it's not good, or you can give them encouragement, or it's important to get that blend of the old and the new, or else, these new guys are going to have to start from scratch. And they're not going to know what to do. They're not going to know how to train their dog. They're not going to know how to deal with, health problems, veterinary problems. We, down through the years, the old guys like us, we did pretty much all our own veterinary work, unless it came to something serious that required surgery or, blood diseases and things like that. But we had the remedies. We knew they would work. We did our own worming. We trimmed our own dog's nails. We knew when we had skin problems with dogs what to do with them. We knew a lot of things, how to treat snake bite, all of these kind of things. Well, these young guys are new guys. They don't know these things, and that's why it's important to have the older guys, and not from a judgmental standpoint, not coming at them like, hey, encouragement, support, tell them they did a good job.
Yeah.
Be there for them when they come back from the woods. Hey, what else you got to do? What's more important?
You got to be that friendly guy that people want to talk to, because I can remember walking into my first coon club, as a competitor, and looking at all these guys that are just kind of staring at me, trying to figure out who I am and what I'm doing there and stuff like that. And, people weren't, didn't give you that lovey-dovey feeling when you walked in the clubhouse back in the day. Everybody was pretty much business when it came to, night hunting or whatever. And, that's kind of, I'm just using myself as an example because I'm the only one that I can really relate to with this. But, that's kind of my big thing is I just want to make everybody feel welcome when they come through that club door and make them feel like they just, stepped into their own house, with their own family members and stuff like that. Because I think that says a lot more to somebody.
Are you there, Corey?
Their first time at a coon club than, even if they come in there and they win their first time, I think that setting a good atmosphere at the coon club's vital, for sure.
Yeah, that's what I picked up from Caden Riley, talking about the kids. They were the same. The demeanor was the same, whether they were winning or whether they were losing. Mm-hmm. Be gracious when you win, be respectful when you lose, that sort of thing. And the older hunters can help. When I was at the AKC, I sat in meeting after meeting with a lot of confirmation show people, and they were talking about the clubs and the parent clubs for each of the breed, and talking about the dog clubs and how that the sport, as they call it, was aging. The judges getting older. If you ever watch Westminster Dog Show, you'll see that by the time a person gets to be what they call an all-rounder, a person that can judge every breed, they're, as my mother would say, they got one foot in the grave and the other on a banana peel, I mean, old. And they were talking about, how to increase club membership and all. Well, the one thing, you nailed it. Just be welcoming. Just be friendly. Just be nice. Don't look at a new club member that comes in as competition, especially if you're hunting for money. As Jamie Perrin, my buddy in Alabama, said, we're pot builders, Just look at them as a pot builder. Yeah, come on in, buddy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but... No, be sincere about it. We get our laughs about it, but be sincere. Be a good club member. Welcome. And that applies to anything that you're doing in life. If it's my neighborhood, I got a neighbor down the street down here. He likes to sit out on these hot days. Oh man, not me. I'm in the cooler, man. But if you go by, he and a couple of guys will be sitting out under an oak tree, and it's always, hey, come on over. We got an extra chair. Come on. And I'm like, John, let's postpone this till the weather gets a little cooler. But no, he's a welcoming guy, and the people gather at his house because of that, So, well, wow.
Yeah, I think we all get a little ate up with the routine of competition. We go to the coon clubs to hunt our dogs, put our wins on them. We've got goals that we want to achieve, but that should never take precedent to stopping and taking a moment for someone that wants to learn, or may not know anybody and just need some encouragement. I think we all need to make time for that, for sure.
Yes. And I can promise you guys that when you get older and you're not able to get out there and butt heads with those other guys and run and gun in competition, you'll appreciate the friends you made along the way, the guys that you can sit with and tell the stories and share with and have fun. And that's what I look for now in going to Autumn Oaks or any event, or going to the White River each fall with my friends out there. I don't now at Fort, I think this will be my 15th year. When I first went out there, man, I wanted to hunt. Now, I want to visit, eat, nap, eat some more, visit some more. And then when it gets dark, let's go tree a coon or two or three. And by the time we've done that, I'm ready to go back, But our lives change, and I'm reminded, and I apologize to my friends, but I don't really apologize either, because I think it's so important the older that I get. And I heard this in church when I was a little kid: only one life will soon be passed. Only what's done for God will last. Well,
amen.
Only what we do for our Creator, for our fellow man, and our families, those are the things that are going to last. They're going to pay the big dividends in the end, for sure. Corey, when I had Dexter Watley on last week, we talked about track dogs. Of course, Dex is a blue dog man. He likes his blue dogs. We kind of, after you and I had devoted a couple of episodes to tree dogs and what we liked and didn't like in tree dogs and the kind of problems we had from time to time, and I'm sure we didn't completely cover that. And I know we don't have much time here left tonight to get into this very deeply, but you like a good track dog? Or do you rather just have it all at the tree?
I think it's absolutely necessary. And I qualify that with, yes, it's absolutely necessary, but there are dogs out there that can get away with not having to be the best track dogs. Whether that's because they're more of a layup type dog or whatever, but I think my preference leans towards more of a trailing type dog. Something that's good about getting its mouth open and using its mouth quite a bit. So,
well, we talk about tree dogs that will trail and trail dogs that will tree.
There's a big difference. Oh yeah. For sure.
When I was a kid, and my dad would point this out to me, he said, these Plott puppies will tree before they start running the track. And if you don't have a tree dog in the Plott breed, then you don't really have a Plott. That's the way he felt about it. And I know that down through the years, especially in some of the big game packs, that's not necessarily true. I think there are a lot of dogs within the Plott breed have lost the ability to locate on scent and stay treed on scent. To me, that's what a tree dog is. A dog that can locate that tree and will stay there just based on the scent, not being able to see it up there on the first limb. But track dogs was something that was instilled in me from the time I was a very young kid. My dad always wanted dogs that could really run a track. And that was not just not just a hot track. That would, find a direction. When we started the UKC Beagle program, we picked up a saying that said, to run the track as fast as scenting conditions would allow. And that's what we talked about in speed and drive in a Beagle dog. Yeah. But I've always loved a good track dog. Always loved a drifting track dog, one that, gets a direction, puts a direction on that track, and then progresses in that way and hitting it here and there until he can move up on it. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that popularity-wise, I think that, if you're talking about tree dogs versus trailing type dogs, and not even dogs per se, but just talking about the aspects of trailing versus treeing. I think treeing is more of a popular topic, number one, because it's stylish, it's flashy, you get a lot of brownie points there if you're a hard tree dog, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, the behavior that's being displayed is very simplistic in the way that it's being conducted. There's not a whole lot to it. A dog either really has it or they don't. Trailing is something, the ability to trail is something that has a lot of variables associated with it. There's a lot of genetic components to it. There's a lot of environmental components to it. And trailing is one thing that a dog can really improve and hone in on and make its own over time. Whereas I feel like treeing, you either have it or you don't, and once a dog's mastered that, there's not much else that's going on to improve that. It can certainly get worse, but it can't really get better. But I've seen so many young dogs that, guys would say, oh, they're not very good track dogs or whatever. But man, the more that they aged and the more experience they just got so much better. And I think that it's really fun to watch that progress and, throughout time. So that's my favorite aspect of trailing, if you want to talk about it, is watching a dog really learn the trade, learn the skill.
Yeah, and it is a skill set that the dogs develop. And you get back to that old question: is the dog really is his nose really that much better than the other dog, or does he just have a lower excitability threshold? Does he bark on less scent than another dog? Maybe his nose isn't any better, but it just excites him more at a lower level. And I think that's a valid question, and a question to ponder, if you will. Mentioned with Dexter last week, a dog we had called Sam that would wind in front of the truck as we were rolling down a mountain road and go way back up on the side of a mountain and open on a cold track that he had winded from the road. Just the foot scent, it was all he was smelling where that coon had been through there. And you could tell by the way he had to kind of work on it a while before he got it the right direction going. But he was one didn't have to work very long. He had that uncanny tracking ability. And that was something that was ingrained in me when I was very young, that's what a good dog did, was a dog that could take that track. My dad could not abide a dog that would stand on its head barking in the same place. That just did not go.
Mm-hmm.
And I can remember going to some of the early hunts up in Ohio and out in Kentucky when I started to venture out from the hills, and to how much some of these dogs barked on track.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't used to that. I was used to dogs that telegraphed to you what the condition of the track was by how they were barking. These dogs just barked all the time.
Yeah.
And then they're way out here 100 yards or more. And then first thing you know, they're right back to the place where they struck. And then they're working it out again. And then they're right back to where, and these guys just seem to be eating that up, man. Don't that sound good? Well, it did. The barking was pleasant to the ear, but it was killing me. The fact that these dogs could not get that track out of there and go with it, So I've always liked the track. Which is more important, track or tree?
Oh, track, 100%.
Yeah,
110%. I've seen a lot of dogs that as they matured, they may be a little slow to tree, but as they matured, they'd settle into some sort of style, and they treat enough that you could get to them and get coon shot out to them. But I've seen the exact opposite too. I've seen some great tree dogs that couldn't do jack if there weren't hot coons moving around and stuff like that. So,
well, here's an old argument. Back they said, well, when UKC trained up the tree point, first tree to 125, that it helped the tree dog. And a lot of the older hunters said, no, that helps the track dog, because the better track dog is the one that's going to get treed first. He's the dog that's going to get that track to the tree. And I don't think a lot of hunters think about it that way,
Right.
But that ability to track and move that, or what you want to call it, trail, track, run the track, whatever you choose to call it, that ability to get that from point A to point B in the shortest period of time is the winner chicken dinner as far as I'm concerned.
Well, and we see that a lot with dogs, with tighter mouth dogs, for example. I've seen a lot of dogs that were pretty tight mouthed as far as using their mouth on a track. And they usually end up with a lower strike position, like, 50 or 25. But man, they're coming up treed first or by themselves and getting 125, so that makes them extremely competitive in the grander scheme of things, especially if they're out ahead of a dog that outstruck them. So
yeah, and you'll find out the dog that barks the most is not necessarily the best track dog.
Yeah, no,
that's 101 right there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I do love a good track dog. I love a dog that can, as this term comes up, takes his tracks as he comes to them. Well, that just means if he smells a cold track, he'll work that out and tree it. If he runs across a hot track, he'll buzz that one in there and tree it. But just, and that's my kind of coon dog. Corey, we have been at it almost 1 hour and 18 minutes. I think that's enough to punish these people, don't you?
We beat their eardrums off, that's for sure.
Well, man, it's been great to have you back on, and I hope that that's going to continue here as we go forward. This 4th of July is behind us, and we're less than 2 months from Autumn Oaks. And after Autumn Oaks, I always looked at that when I left Richmond, Indiana, and headed back to Michigan. I could feel fall in the air. I could feel a little bit of change in temperature. And that's what we're all living for, I'm sure. And I got a note from a classmate, and she happened to be the daughter-in-law of a guy that I used to coon hunt with, and he's the one that wrote the story that appears in the Tales from Full Cry podcast about dogs that spent 3 days and 3 nights in a cave.
Yeah.
His name was Leo Lars, and we had a similar experience with a dog, a Plott dog called Smokey one time. And but anyway, I don't want to ruin that for you. You need to go over to W Hunting Supply podcast or anywhere that you can get. Just Google, I think that podcast is called Tales from the Pages of Full Cry.
From the pages of Full Cry.
From the pages of Full Cry.
Yes,
Look
sir.
that up. It's on the the Hound Podcast, W Supply Network, but anyway, she said, I'll finally get to the story, that probably my class will be having a reunion in October in West Virginia. Unbelievable, people. I can't believe it. 60 years. 60th class reunion this year for me.
Wow.
You
Congratulations.
to even be alive still is quite a feat. But anyway, I told her, I said, well, I like to go to the mountains in the fall. So hopefully, we'll get up that way, and who knows. But I've got a lot of wishes, for this fall. Like to get back up to Michigan to hunt a little. Like to get together with all my buddies across the hunting countryside and spend a night or two. I wish that were possible. I sure do. Had so many good times over the years, and I know we'd make some more. But we do what we can, and through this podcast, Gone to the Dogs, we try to come to you each week with our stories and our thoughts and our corny humor and all the things that go along with it. But we sure do appreciate you listening to us each week. And the numbers are great for the podcast, the downloads we're getting. And Corey, I appreciate you so much for coming in and bringing a fresh perspective to these sessions. And that is terrific. And so I guess before I just wear these people totally out, we better get out of here and do something constructive.
Yeah, we need to pee on the fire and load the dogs up.
Call the dogs. That's what we used to always say back in the mountains. Time to pee on the fire and call the dogs.
There you go.
Folks, visit our friends at W Hunting Supply if you need anything in the way of apparel or equipment, especially electronics. Those folks service what they sell. And Alpha Dog Nutrition is a fairly new sponsor as well. And you can get a nice offer on the W site. Just go to their website and all that stuff's available. But until next week, this is Steve Fielder for Corey Groover, and we're simply Gone to the Dogs.
That's right. See you, everybody.